Well, hello and welcome to another episode of the Reiki Lifestyle Podcast. I'm here with Colleen.
Hi, everyone.
And our guest today is Ann Baldwin PhD. Ann, if you want to just say hi real quick before we
Hi, everybody.
So Ann's been on our podcast before, and we just always love to have her on because she's amazing. All of our guests are amazing, but we're just always fascinated by all of the subjects that she has to talk about. So we will get into that, but I do want to go ahead and introduce Ann. So Ann Linda Baldwin, PhD, is a recently retired professor of physiology at the University of Arizona. She also is director of Mind-Body Science, is a Reiki Master, and has practiced Reiki on people and animals for the last 20 years. Her degrees are BSc in Physics from the University of Bristol, UK, MSc in Radiation Physics, and PhD in Physiology from the University of London, UK, and focuses on reducing the damaging effects of stress using biofeedback, Reiki, and Equine Assisted Learning. She has published over 120 articles in peer-reviewed scientific journals and one book, Reiki in Clinical Practice, a Science-Based Guide, from Handspring Publishing. Ann has received 30 years of funding from federal institutions and has served on review panels for National Institutes of Health. With her Reiki training and scientific background, Ann bridges the gap between energy healing and quantitative scientific inquiry. In her spare time, Ann rides her horse and is a horse handler for Therapeutic Riding of Tucson. And you can find Ann at Mind Body Science. So that has a dash in between each of those words. So mind-body-science.com. And her email is abaldwin@mindbodyscience.com. All right. Well, welcome, Ann.
Thank you.
So glad to have you back. As we have, said on this podcast, we reference your book all the time on this podcast, your Reiki and clinical practice all the time in our classes and all of that. It really is such an amazing resource in the Reiki community, and so is all of your other work. So we're excited to hear. I know every time we have the privilege and pleasure of getting to talk to you and also seeing your presentations, you always have a, kind of an update at where the research is within Reiki. So we would just love to hear that, of course. And for those of you that are listening on in the audio versions on the podcast platforms, we're going to actually be doing some screen sharing today. As well, and has some charts that she would like to share. So I just wanted to say that up front, that if you want to see those, that you will want to go and check out this episode on our YouTube channel, which is Reiki Lifestyle. All right. So why don't we go ahead and get into it, Ann. Why don't you just tell us a little bit about, where you're at and all of that on, we do have some new listeners, so maybe just tell us a little bit about yourself and then, where we're at with the research and all of that.
Right. So I've been doing Reiki, as Robyn said, for about 20 years. And I'm a physiologist. Well, my first degree was actually in physics. I'm a scientist. And I had never heard of Reiki until I employed a technician for my research at the University of Arizona, who was a Reiki Master, and we were doing some work on rats, and the experiments weren't working very well. And we discovered that the rats were in a very stressful environment, very noisy, and we thought maybe that was the cause of why the experiments weren't working very well. And so she said, well, why don't we give Reiki to the rats? And as I said, I never heard of Reiki before, and I was very skeptical. But we did actually get a grant from the NIH, 2-year grant, to do Reiki on the rats to see if it improved their stress levels. And the stress was actually being manifested in the intestine. And so there were ways we could measure the stress levels from what it was doing to the intestine. And when we gave them Reiki every day for 3 weeks, the problems disappeared. So the stress manifestation was not there anymore. We also had a sham Reiki group where someone was pretending to give Reiki who hadn't been trained, and they did not show, they showed some effect, but not nearly as great as the Reiki. And then we had another set of rats who didn't receive Reiki or sham Reiki, and they continued to show the stress. So that was the first thing that made me interested in Reiki, and decided to learn Reiki myself and start my own business, Mind Body Science, because I thought, well, if it's good for the rats, it must be good for the people. So that's how I got into Reiki. And so I still continue to see clients. I'm retired, so I just see clients once a week on Tuesdays, but I still teach Reiki and give Reiki sessions. I'm also head of, I organize research, so research coordinator for the Center for Reiki Research. And that is an important resource, because if you go to centerforreikiresearch.org, and Center for Reiki Research is all one word, if you go to that email address, that URL, then you will have access to summaries of all the peer-reviewed research studies on Reiki that we have put together. So I'll talk a little bit about the process that we use to evaluate and summarize the research. So about, let me see, about 14 or 15 years ago, I got a phone call from William Rand, and I never met him, didn't know much about him. And of course, he leads the International Center for Reiki Training. And he told me he was putting together a group of scientists who were also trained in Reiki to evaluate the science behind Reiki, because he thought it would be very important to know what scientific evidence there was to support Reiki. And some people think, oh, well, I know Reiki works. Why do we need science? Well, I'll tell you two reasons. One reason is Reiki is kind of at a disadvantage compared to some other complementary medicine techniques, such as, say, acupuncture or chiropractic or massage, because there is no compulsory licensing or examination. So say I didn't know anything about massage or Reiki, I'd never experienced them, and maybe I have a pain in my shoulder or something, or pain in my back. And I would think that if I knew that a massage practitioner had done all the exams and passed the certification, and I would know that they knew what they were doing. Whereas with Reiki, I know it's true that if they've been trained, for example, in International Center for Reiki Training, they have a certain curriculum, but not everyone is. So I really wouldn't know what I was getting. And I think there it would be an advantage to know that actually, yes, there have been many studies that show that Reiki is good at reducing pain, and that might make me more likely to choose Reiki. So that's one important reason for having the Reiki research. So there's objective supportive evidence that Reiki works for certain conditions. Another important reason for the science is that, say I ran a hospital and someone suggested I set up a Reiki program in my hospital. And it's going to, it will be investing a lot of money and effort to get this program going. And so I'm much more likely to invest if I have proof that, yes, there are these objective outcomes that Reiki does help people with pain, with anxiety, with depression, and they get out of hospital faster if they're in hospital. They don't need so much pain medication. So there is evidence for all of these things. And if I was aware of that, then I would be more likely to invest. So that's another important reason for doing science and getting objective data. So we can make Reiki more widely accessible because people will be more willing to invest in it. So that's why science is important. And going back to how we evaluate the science. So years ago, our group varies who's on the group throughout the years, but currently we have 10 reviewers on the group, and all of us are PhDs or MDs and a couple of nurses as well. And we are all Reiki Masters. So we have a good medical or scientific background. And every month we meet by Zoom, and I go through all the databases to see what new studies have been published on Reiki, original Reiki research, and pick out the studies that qualify. So for a study to qualify, it needs to be a full-length study, not just an abstract, full-length paper. And it needs to be original research on Reiki in a peer-reviewed journal. So then we decide who's going to evaluate those papers, and 2 people at least evaluate each paper. And we developed evaluation forms that ask very relevant questions about the research. For example, how many people were involved in the research? Were there any control groups? So if everyone gets Reiki, we have no comparison. But if half the people get Reiki and half the people don't, then we have a direct comparison between those who got Reiki and those who didn't, about their benefits or not. Also, that I mentioned sham Reiki. Sham Reiki is when someone pretends to give Reiki, but they haven't got any training in Reiki. So they do all the hand positions, just like they're doing Reiki. And that way, the person receiving it, assuming they've never had Reiki before, or even if they have, won't know which group that they're in, which removes any bias. So sham Reiki is another way you can do a control group. So, so are there any controls? How many people are there? The more people are involved, the better the results are, the stronger statistically the results are. And then we also make sure that we ask if the studies have reported enough detail about what they actually did, what they measured, about the Reiki practitioners, how well trained were they, and what experience did they have. So all of these are very, very important so that we can analyze and evaluate the studies to see how robust they are. And then once we have 2 reviews for each paper, then someone will take those reviews and do a summary of the main points of the paper and the strengths and weaknesses. And all those are available on that website that I told you about. And right now we have evaluated 96 studies of Reiki research. And we give them a score according to how well they fulfill those criteria, some of which I told you about. And I'm just going to share my screen just to show you a chart of all the Reiki studies, and over the years, how many Reiki studies we have evaluated over the years, and how what their quality was. So I'll just show this, and I'll describe it as well as I can to those of you who don't have access to the picture.
So quick question, Ann. Are there, you said you meet once a month. Are there studies that are coming out that often?
Yes, yes.
Right. That's so fascinating. I had no idea.
Yeah, I think on average, we have like a couple of studies a month.
Really?
Yeah. Right now, yes.
Interesting.
Yeah, and it's fascinating because the last 2 years, there's been a flurry of research in Turkey. Yeah, lots of people in Turkey doing research on Reiki, and they don't get funding for it. So obviously, where they work, they're allowing them time to do these studies and paying them.
Interesting.
Mm.
That's so cool.
Yeah. Anyway, so I put the chart up on the screen. Can you see it?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay. So it starts at 1996, and each little rectangle is one study. And you can see 1996, there was 1 study, 97, no studies, 98, 1, 99, none, 2001. And then by about 2004, you see the number of studies per year increasing, and it kind of goes up almost exponentially on average until you get to 2021. There were 12 studies in 2021. And 2022, there actually, and there's one missing there. There were 12 studies in 2022 as well. I just haven't put the last one up there yet. And already we're getting ones in for 2023. So
fantastic.
So it's very good. So the stages of Reiki research with regards to the quantity, yeah, it's we had a kind of down patch like 2017 to maybe 2019, but now it's kind of taking off again.
Interesting.
And the colors, so all of these little rectangles are different colors, and each color represents the quality, what score they got based on whether they have how many people they had, whether they had control groups, whether they had reproducible ways of measuring their outcomes, etc. And the brown ones we consider weak studies that didn't fulfill all those criteria. The orange ones are satisfactory, kind of so-so studies. And the light green are between satisfactory and very good. So, and then we have green, dark green is very good, turquoise very good to excellent, and dark blue is excellent. And so you can see that there are a fair number of those orange studies, the ones that are kind of so-so, but you can also see there is a good number of the ones that are light green, green or blue, which indicate the higher quality studies. And as I said, there's another one in 2022, and that will probably get a turquoise or a dark blue. So, and there's another one in 2023, which hasn't gone totally through our process but I predict that will also be an excellent paper. So,
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to ask real quick. So are these studies that you're, they're being published onto like a PubMed, and then do they have like, first author, second, like that kind of process to them, even if they're somewhat of a weak study?
Yes, all of the papers, even the weak ones that I've put here, they will show up on a database like Medline, and they will be in peer-reviewed journals. So even though we might consider them weak, the reviewers for the journal allowed it to be published. Okay. I mean, some of those papers, I think, if I had been the reviewer, I would say no.
Yeah, okay.
The journals kind of vary in their quality as well. Some journals will let papers in that other journals would not accept. Yeah. So, for example, the very highest journals like Nature and Science, I mean, they accept very, very few papers. Yeah. Yeah, so you can see that the Reiki research studies are increasing in number, and they're maintaining fairly good quality.
Fantastic.
And will you be describing what some of these studies are showing?
Yes, I will. Okay. So from what we've looked at so far, there is good evidence that Reiki is good for improving, reducing pain under a lot of circumstances. So there have been a lot of studies on pain. So it could be patients who are having a surgery, and they receive Reiki maybe before their surgery and after their surgery, and they showed significantly less pain and also less anxiety. So not only is Reiki good at reducing pain, it also reduces anxiety that is associated with that. Pain also in like chronic pain. So chronic pain, Reiki is very good with as well. Pain associated with cancer, so that's another kind of chronic pain. And with chemotherapy, quite a few studies on chemotherapy for cancer patients, and it really does show reduced pain and reduced anxiety in those people, which is very important. And then people with terminal diseases who are in hospice or palliative care, Reiki is also very good for those people. Not only does it reduce pain and reduce their anxiety, it also helps them spiritually come to terms with what's happening to them. In fact, I gave a talk yesterday to UK Reiki Federation in England, and there are a few medical doctors on that Zoom session, and they said they had patients in hospice or palliative care who benefited greatly from Reiki. So that's nice to hear.
Yeah.
So pain, anxiety, also depression. There are quite a few studies that show that Reiki is helpful for people with depression. Fatigue, that's another one. People often feel fatigued when they're undergoing hospital interventions like surgery or chemotherapy, a lot of fatigue, and that it helps with fatigue. Reiki is also good for caregivers like nurses. There are quite a few studies, strong studies, showing that nurses, when they do self-Reiki, not only does it help them physically and emotionally, make them more balanced, it also improves their work, makes them do the job better too, because they've taken care of themselves, and then they can give more freely to their patients. So that's mainly, of course, also Reiki is just good for people who are not sick, just maintaining their well-being. Reiki is excellent for reducing your stress and overwhelm, and reducing your own anxiety every now and then.
Definitely.
Well, and this also shows the importance of the studies, because if you can show this level of result, and in the medical settings where it really is, there's a lot more skepticism around it. Although I would say in my own experience, and you've been teaching 20 years also, certainly seeing a lot more mainstream acceptance of Reiki as an effective complementary therapy, working in medicine.
Yeah, that is encouraging, definitely. But we still get the skeptics too, both in the USA and the UK. NIH still maintains that Reiki, there's no evidence that Reiki does any good medically at all. And that just is not true.
Well, even anecdotally, we know, our own results. Most of us that are long-term practitioners, Reiki would be like, to me, out of all the things that you would do, if it didn't have the results and it didn't have an effect, that means you would just be standing with somebody for hours on end with nothing happening. For those, ADD people like myself, it would definitely not have held any interest for me, for sure. But, all kidding aside, the results, I think, are always what is so fascinating and inspiring as a person. I was saying to somebody else this morning, like, this just gives me so much fulfillment that I have something like this to share and to make a difference with.
Yeah, and apart from reducing anxiety and pain, etc., Reiki often just changes people's lives, really helps them with their goals and what they want to do with their life, and gets them out of ruts.
And into innovation and creativity, ideas, possibilities. Really activates your gifts.
Yeah,
So,
I've had clients, in a terrible state, and one recently in a terrible state, and just just going nowhere, and just some Reiki sessions, and now he's got a whole plan of what he wants to do, but that makes total sense.
That Reiki enhances, activates, you know, our higher thought and higher consciousness. So you want to share also about your book?
Right.
I know we talk about it all the time on our podcast and our distance Reiki shares and things, but I'd love to hear about it from you. And then you've just written another book. So if you want to talk about both of those.
Do we want to stop the screen share? And then when you're
Yes,
talking about the new research that's come out, and then we can screen share again.
Yeah. Okay. So I wrote the Reiki book. It's called Reiki in Clinical Practice, a Science-Based Guide. I've never written a book before. I've written lots of papers, but never a book. And in fact, I had no intention of writing a book. And actually, the publisher, Handspring Publishers, they said, they contacted me and they said, we'd like a book on Reiki. So I hear about all these authors who write something and then have to go around looking for a publisher. And with me, it was the other way around. Very fortunate. So they asked me to write it. And I wrote it because as I've said, I think it's very important that people in medicine understand what Reiki is and how it can benefit their patients. And so that is the purpose of this book, but it's useful also not just for medical people, but anybody who does Reiki or receives Reiki, so that they can read through it. So there are chapters on Reiki for pain, Reiki for anxiety, Reiki for depression, Reiki during surgery, Reiki in hospice, etc. So that you can, if you just want to read a chapter, you can just find the chapter and see what has been shown scientifically, what benefits are there with Reiki. How does Reiki help people with these various conditions?
I think also the viewpoint of the book, as far as just for people that have that kind of viewpoint of Reiki and how it can help with, you know, like how you talk about the biofields, how you talk about the Schumann resonance of the heart. I know when we have had students and things like that, that come into classes with that understanding of, like, that's how they see all of this, that they find so much home in your book, because it's like, oh, there's the words for how Reiki interacts with our with our world and with ourselves in a way that really resonates with me. And I think that it's really important for that purpose as well, that I just talk to people constantly about how much that piece of it and how it's written in that language is really helpful for them in their experience of Reiki.
Yeah, for me, it really helps to have some kind of picture of what is the Reiki doing? How is it interacting? And so in terms of energy fields, so we all have energy fields created mainly by the heart, but also by the brain. And the theory is that Reiki is also an energy that can it can interact with the body's fields. So there's this idea that each system and organ in the body has its own frequency that helps it function optimally. So everything's a vibration. Everything is energy. And so, say the liver has its own vibrating frequency that makes it work best. And when things go wrong, the theory is that means that the frequency has deviated from its optimal value. It's just gone off course. And the idea is that the Reiki, also an energy that vibrates, and it vibrates at many different frequencies, will bring that organ back to its usual optimal frequency. Yeah. And I find that very helpful, just to have an idea of a picture of what might be going on. And that's in the book as well. So they're still all theories. I mean, I'm not saying this is true, but it really is helpful to have at least a model of what we think could be happening.
Yeah, and just that the language is so helpful to define it even for themselves, and how they how they see it all, and how they see why it's working, you know?
Yeah. Mhm.
That's fantastic.
Well, the
Yeah.
biofield part of it and the electromagnetic fields and, like you say, the energy and the frequencies of it.
Yeah, it's incredible. I think there was a paper written, it was by Burr, B-U-R-R, about what I'm talking about the vibrations and the frequencies. And this was written like in 1920 or something. And then, you know, I don't know, the science just changed and that stuff was forgotten. And I think it's coming back now.
Yeah.
Realization that the frequencies of vibration are very important to functioning of life.
Well, and it's been
It's not
described
just
to me in a kind of a metaphysical way, as it is also another one of the earth elements that we think of, you know, the earth, the air, the fire, the water, and but really these frequencies are elements. You know, it's an element that we're just really starting to understand, or maybe remembering, you know.
remembering. Yes.
Yeah, we've known before.
Well, so tell us about your new book too, Ann.
Okay, well, before I do that, I'll just show you
Yeah, please do. Yeah.
Can you see that?
Yep, Reiki and Clinical Practice, a science-based guide. And you can get that on Amazon.
Yeah, you can.
Yep, and Reiki.org, as well as Handspring Publishing.
Yes. Mhm.
We highly recommend it. And it's, I think another really big value of it is also for those who are working in a population of people who are either skeptical or they just don't know about the existence of energy like Reiki, that it does give people a language that has a science base. It has, you know, a little bit more kind of mainstream languaging and can be really helpful. We always recommend it to people who inevitably ask the question of, I have family members that are completely skeptical.
Mhm.
How do I talk about Reiki to them? And we recommend your book, you know, so to be helpful, to give people languaging and evidence, you know, of the results.
Well, then the same publisher, Handspring, they've actually now sold their publishing company to another company called Jessica Kingsley Publishing. They asked me if I would write another book, and they were wanting a book on the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve is the longest nerve in the body. It goes all the way from the base of the skull all the way down to the base of the spine. And it has lots of branches that innervate every single organ. So your heart, your kidneys, your liver, everywhere, your stomach, intestine. And it is responsible for regulating digestion and for calming you down. So it's the parasympathetic, the vagus nerve, that is responsible for slowing your heart rate when you're doing deep, slow breathing or doing Reiki. That is what's responsible for keeping you calm and balanced. And so it's a very, very important nerve. And in this book, so there are many, as I said, there are many branches of the vagus nerve, including branches that go into the face. So every time you smile, so there's a little branch from the vagus nerve that innervates your smile muscles. So every time you smile, you're activating your vagus nerve and getting that calm feeling. So even if you feel really lousy, if you do a fake smile, it actually makes you feel better.
Oh, interesting. Oh, that's so fascinating about the book in general. I mean, that too, but the book in general, that's really exciting.
So they asked me in particular to align this book with different therapeutic practices that could help you access the vagus nerve in different ways. So, for example, let's say acupuncture. There are ways that acupuncture can activate the vagus nerve. And then massage. There are ways that massage can activate the vagus nerve. Reiki, of course, activates the vagus nerve. And then colon hydrotherapy, that's another thing that activates the vagus nerve. Just having a good meal to do with digestion, that will activate the vagus nerve. And then deep, slow breathing, just a long exhale, just going, that will activate the vagus nerve as well. So mindful breathing will do it. And so I have case studies using all these different techniques to illustrate how you can activate the vagus nerve. And those are described in the book.
Really fun.
Mm.
Wow, that's really neat. When's that due out?
It's due out in November.
Okay.
Yeah, it takes them a long time to get everything fixed up and ready.
Yeah, of course.
Well, and we'll have you back when we have that too.
Yeah.
Also, they ask for, so this is for a kind of little series they have. So it's shorter than the other book, shorter than the Reiki book, and written in a more chatty style. So it's an easier read.
Okay.
But it's still is scientifically based.
Cool. Well, why don't you tell us just a little bit about some of the updated research?
Mm-hmm.
And that, I know we always like to hear what has been shown in the last, year or so since
Right.
we talked to you last, would be fantastic.
Okay, I will get that. And can you see it?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay, so I have about 4 studies I want to talk about. So 2019, this was a large-scale effectiveness trial of Reiki for physical and psychological health. So this was an interesting study, and I was involved in it. The principal author was Natalie Dyer, who is president of the Center for Reiki Research. And so we've talked about the importance of clinical trials and having control groups, et cetera, and that really is the gold standard for scientific research. But there's another place for a different kind of research, real life. I call it real life research, because we can't control everything in real life. And so it's important to know, well, how effective is Reiki in real life when we're not making sure everything's quiet and peaceful and whatever, because it's not always like that. So this is a real life study, and it's basically people going to their Reiki practitioners for a Reiki session. And all the Reiki practitioners in the study were trained in the International Center for Reiki Training. So they all had the same training, which is a strength. And we had a total of 99 Reiki Masters giving the sessions and they gave over 1,400 sessions. So this is a large scale study. And in the study, the people receiving Reiki, they agreed to fill in a questionnaire before and after their Reiki session. And so they would give numerical values, like from 0 to 10, for what happened to their pain level, what happened to their anxiety, what happened to other symptoms, etc. And what we found was that there were significant statistical improvements for all the outcome measures, including pain, anxiety, and well-being. So that was very encouraging, that just going to your regular Reiki practitioner for a Reiki session can work. You don't have to necessarily be in the ideal situation. Mm-hmm. And then the disadvantage of this study was there was no control group or sham Reiki group, because if someone's going, it's real life, if someone's going to their Reiki practitioner, they expect to get Reiki.
Yeah.
You couldn't just go and your practitioner would say, oh, sorry, you're in the control group, I'm not working on you today.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. And that's 14 over 1,400 sessions.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, that's
so it's very strong statistically.
Yeah.
And then another large-scale study. So it's important, as I mentioned, that you have more people in the studies, because that will lend more credence to the results, the statistical results. So in this one, there are 180 oncology patients. Those are cancer patients. And they were divided into 3 groups, so 60 in each group. And one group received Reiki, one group received guided imagery, and one group nothing. And Reiki and guided imagery both helped the patients with pain and fatigue. So both of them significantly reduced their pain and their fatigue. But the ones who didn't get either didn't show any effect. So that's another. So this is slightly different. The first one was, just regular people going for their Reiki sessions, and these ones were people with cancer. So different population, but it also works for them too.
Okay.
And then a couple more. Okay, here we are. This one, okay, this is very new. This has just come out. This is another large-scale study, and this was a randomized controlled trial of Reiki's effects on stress, anxiety, and comfort levels on patients undergoing upper gastrointestinal endoscopy. That is a long description of basically what it is there's a camera on a wire that is stuck down your throat to examine the inner lining of your basically your food tree, your esophagus. And personally, if someone's going to stick this thing down my throat, I am probably going to be feeling a lot of stress and anxiety and discomfort.
Colleen, you just had one relatively recently, didn't you?
Yes, but I think it was under anesthetic.
Oh, okay.
Although Reiki would help for that too, of course.
Yeah.
Anyway, so very distasteful procedure. And so the patients were given 30 minutes Reiki or sham Reiki. So 53 in each group. One group got Reiki, one group got sham Reiki, where somebody did exactly the same hand positions, except they didn't have any training. And then there was another 53 who didn't have any treatment. And Reiki, and this is interesting, Reiki, but not sham Reiki, produced a significant reduction in stress, anxiety, and an increase in comfort. So this is important because we have a sham Reiki group here. So it is not just being touched. It's not just having someone give you attention and look as if they care about you. It's more than that, because that alone did not give the results. You do need the Reiki energy. That's one thing that a lot of skeptics will say, oh, well, it's just the placebo effect. It's just because people are getting touched and they feel better. No, this shows it's not just the placebo effect.
Yeah.
So that's why it's important to have these control groups.
Yeah, super important. I mean, because it does show that there is some benefit, in some of the studies have showed a tiny benefit of like just the sham Reiki, because there is the touch. Probably also would depend on what it's for, right? I mean, this is complete conjecture, so I will qualify it with this, but I would imagine like if you're in hospital for a long time for a variety of reasons, or maybe like even in a hospice situation, that touch therapy might mean something a little different than if you're in for this kind of procedure, right?
Yes. Yeah, I'm not saying that touch doesn't do anything. It's just that it did not give the results that Reiki gave.
Yeah, exactly. That's
and in fact,
fantastic.
Not only did the sham Reiki and no treatment have no effect on stress, anxiety, and comfort, actually had the opposite effect. So each person was tested twice, whatever group they were in. The ones who got the sham Reiki or the control showed an increase in stress and anxiety and a decrease in comfort. So it got worse for them, worse for the Reiki people, it got better.
Interesting. They're like, don't touch me. Man, that's really fascinating.
Yeah.
And another thing in this paper that I found really encouraging was that the authors recommended that all nurses should learn Reiki in their undergraduate studies.
Wow.
It should be part of the course. And I mean, just imagine that.
Oh, it would be so different for them.
If all the nurses learned Reiki.
Yeah. Just for their own personal well-being.
Yeah.
You know, as well as the people in the hospital, the patients, the family members of the patients, everything. It would just be such a difference.
And there's just one more I'd like to talk about. So this one hasn't even finished going through our review process yet, but it was so good, I just pulled it out and decided to talk about it. I'm sure this will get a very high score. And this was on distance Reiki, and a randomized controlled trial of distant Reiki's effects on fatigue and comfort levels in hemodialysis patients. So these were like patients with kidney disease who needed to go to get their blood cleaned out on a machine, hemodialysis machine, 3 times a week, every week. And some of them signed up for this study, and they were 31 in the Reiki group. So the Reiki group got 40 minutes of Reiki just the night before when they were going to go in for their dialysis. So they received Reiki 3 times a week for 4 weeks. And then the other 31 people were in the no treatment group. And the Reiki produced a significant reduction in fatigue and an increase in comfort level in the Reiki group, even 4 weeks after the last treatment. So it maintained. So they received Reiki for 4 weeks, and then they were also measured again 4 weeks after that last treatment, and they still showed reduction in fatigue and increased comfort level.
Wow.
And the control group showed no effect.
Mm.
And there are 2 other things about this study that were interesting. One was they had a very detailed description of how the Reiki practitioners did their distant Reiki. And I think that is extremely important, that we know exactly what they were doing, because that way we can repeat it. I mean, I thought, wow, that is a really good way of doing distance Reiki. I'm going to try that myself. So rather than just saying, oh, well, we got the name or the photograph or something and just sent them distance Reiki, which is what a lot of the studies say. This one said exactly what they thought about and what they were imaging in their minds as they sent it.
Wow.
Detail.
Is there a way to find out what the protocol is?
Yeah, it's all written up there. So yeah,
Oh.
As soon as this paper is not in press yet, it's you can get it online. But yeah, anyone can read it.
Great.
Really cool.
And then the other interesting thing was that they had access to other data on these patients, such as blood pressure and blood chemistry that was being collected by the hospital and hematocrit. And so they could compare before and after Reiki and before and after no treatment. And they found that Reiki did not affect their blood pressure, hematocrit, or blood chemistry. And that could be, so that there are 2 things spring to mind for me. One is that maybe distant Reiki is not so good at changing physical things. Maybe it's better at changing emotional and mental things. That's one possibility. Another thing is, well, Reiki goes where it's needed. And these people, they were going for hemolysis. Their kidneys weren't working very well. That does not mean necessarily that they had high blood pressure or their hematocrit or blood chemistry was off. It could have been fine. I mean, they're seen 3 times a week at the hospital. And maybe they just didn't, their parameters were not out of the ordinary. So maybe why should they change?
Yeah.
That's another possibility.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, because other studies have shown a change in blood pressure specifically, right? Yeah.
Oh, that not with distant Reiki. This was with hands-on Reiki.
Yeah, in person. Yeah, thank you. Sorry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so right now there are almost 7. So there are 6 published studies and 1 in the works. And I know it's in the works because I was involved in that study being reviewed. And So of the 7, 1 showed no effect of distant Reiki and 6 showed significant positive effects.
Mm.
And I think if we have a little bit of time to talk about where we go from here, I think that distant Reiki is coming more and more important, because number one, it gives Reiki gives people access, more people access to Reiki, because they don't actually have to go anywhere. They can just stay where they are and receive Reiki virtually, from a distance. And then because of COVID, that was another reason, I think, for the spate of new Reiki, distant Reiki research, because you couldn't contact the people, couldn't be in contact with them. So that's why distant Reiki is very important, I think.
And can I ask you kind of a left field question about distance Reiki specifically, especially because of your physics? The non-locality that just won the Nobel Prize in physics, right? Are you familiar with that at all? And is there, the amount that I can understand it is like, minuscule, but to me, obviously it goes immediately to this idea of Reiki, distance Reiki energy work.
Yeah, because I mean, in mainstream science, the further you get away from something, like the further away you get from a light, the dimmer it gets, right? The further away you get from a noise, the less noisy it is. That's like traditional physics. And so how can distance Reiki work? Because by that theory, the further you get away from the Reiki practitioner, the less intense the Reiki is. So you have to, so the traditional space-time continuum of physics just won't explain it. So the non-locality, basically, I imagine it like this, that if I'm sending Reiki to somebody thousands of miles away, the Reiki doesn't have to traverse 1,000 miles away. I think of it as Reiki being everywhere, and maybe we just have our little antennae that we stick up like a radio signal. You're just tuning into the radio. So when I listen to the radio, I can hear someone speaking in England, their voices are coming all the way across the Atlantic Ocean to me. We're just tuning into the same station. So I think that is really how the distance Reiki works. And yes, definitely, that is non-locality.
Yeah, I wonder if, some of these things, as they're discovering them scientifically, I mean, I think obviously we all have the awareness of, because we know that distance Reiki works, like anecdotally, and now also scientifically, there's, scientific evidence, but I do like wonder if some of these things that are being found with that it will start to scientifically explain some of the mechanism behind this, how this all works.
Yes, yeah, and that will really strengthen our case.
Yeah.
So my first study that I got published, the one on the rats, I sent it to the journal that I had 20 papers already published in, the American Journal of Physiology. They wouldn't touch it. The reason they wouldn't touch it was because we didn't know how it worked.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Yeah, really, really interesting. It's great to hear your perspective on that, because I have some scientist friends, but it's not in physics. So it's great to hear that, with your experience with physics, that there's an application there that's potentially coming down the pipeline somewhere.
Actually, I have a friend, and she works with energy fields in another realm, and she does workshops, and she had a group from Raytheon. They make missiles in Tucson. It's a company that makes missiles. So there were these physicists who used to like making missiles, and they came to her branch in Arizona to learn about the energy fields, and they got it. They totally understood it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, you see engineers, physicists that will come across like a class every once in a while, and the way that they do, like they understand it in certain ways, but it's that kind of mainstream exception of it that hasn't quite got on. Yeah, really cool. Well, so you said that there's some where we're going from here.
Oh, yeah. So we need more of these large scale studies. There are some, as I mentioned, but we need more with more people in them because they're statistically much stronger. And with control groups, that's very important that we have the control groups. And also not.
And can you stop the screen share real quick so we can?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay. Just so we can see you. There we go.
Also, not just questionnaires to self-report questionnaires. We also want some like hard measures, biomarkers of effects of Reiki, like blood pressure, heart rate variability, stress hormones, etc. I mean, there are studies, so quite a few studies that do have those measurements, but we need more of those, and maybe different ones as well. For example, I would really like to see MRI, magnetic resonance imaging, like a brain scan of, just imagine if you could do a brain scan of someone sending distance Reiki to someone else, and you scan the giver and the receiver, and see which parts of their brain are lighting up. This once again will help with what's going on with the mechanism. So we know for sure from our experiments that Reiki affects the autonomic nervous system in the body, and that's what affects heart rate, the stress response, etc. We know that Reiki helps to calm down the autonomic nervous system. So wouldn't it be amazing if the MRI showed that those parts of the brain associated with regulating the autonomic nervous system were activated when you receive Reiki?
I always think that we need to be doing brain scan studies because it's so amazing how it works. And I often, when I'm in the sessions, and my sessions are very psychic as far as the connection with the other person and really telepathically connecting in, and I think, what part of my brain function is actually being empowered, strengthened, and going back to before I had the because the Reiki energy I know is the facilitator of it, but then also over the course of time, whatever that part of the brain that does that has grown. And I would imagine, in comparison to 20 years ago and where I am today, that part of my brain would have, that muscle would have grown.
Right. Yeah.
So do we know anybody that's considering that study, or is that one we're putting out into the universe to have happen?
Well, actually, the group I'm connected with in London, Reiki Guild, yeah, we're trying to get something set up in the hospitals in London.
Great.
Wow. Yeah,
I have a friend that's just about to start working with the empathy and compassion department at UCSD. So I'm like, hey, she's a neuroscientist. And so, yeah, she's actually expressed interest in like the idea of studying behind it, but obviously that we don't know if that'll happen. So, but I'm going to continue to kind of poke, see if we can make anything come of it.
Well, do you want to tell us about any of your offerings? Are you teaching? You said you practice once a week? Anything?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of keeping it low key right now. And I don't do classes of Reiki training. I found it's much more effective to combine Reiki training with Reiki sessions. And so I have people coming like weekly for a couple of months or more, and they gradually learn about Reiki. And then in the end, they know enough to be attuned. Yeah. And I find that it's much more effective because they have much longer time to digest it and understand it, rather than just giving it all to them in 2 or 3 days.
And so are you offering that regularly now? Like, can people, are you doing in person, online?
Yeah. Oh, in person. Yeah.
In person.
Yeah.
And so you are in Tucson, Arizona.
Yeah. But I mean, I am qualified to do Reiki online. I don't do it that much, but I'm qualified to do that. And then I also can do biofeedback, the heart math work, the mindful breathing, etc. That's easy to do online.
Well, that's a whole other subject we'll want to find out more about.
Like, ooh.
So like, oh, I want to know more about that too. So then your website, if people are interested in contacting you, is mind-body-science.com, mindbodyscience.com. And then your email is abaldwin@mindbodyscience.com.
abaldwin@mind-body-science.com.
Yes. So that'll also be in our show notes. So it'll be written out so people can see it as well. But for those who are only listening, they'll be able to go to it, later. If they're only listening, they can find you also. So is there anything else you would like to share before we finish up?
I'm just always amazed. I mean, week after week, when I see people, I'm just always amazed at what the Reiki is doing to help them. And as you said, it really helps us as well when we see the benefits just before our eyes.
It's endlessly fascinating, isn't it? It just, after all these years, every session is fascinating. Every day with it is it's just so interesting. And the avenues of curiosity to follow with it, and the multitude of the things that Reiki empowers within us. It really is so individual with each person and what they need in the moment.
And then animals too. I do a lot of treatments with animals, and it's fun working with animals because they just show you exactly what they want. And when they're done, they walk away.
They're done, right? We love that part too. They don't have all the filters. They're just them. So do you do animal Reiki sessions also?
Yes.
And are those in person or are those typically online?
Those I go to wherever the animal is. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So where it's local.
Yeah.
Then I was just in Tucson, went to the junction.
I'm going there on Saturday.
Oh yeah, I went last weekend. So it's big. So it's pretty there's lots of choices, of course, of where to go. So well, Ann, thank you so much for being here with us, and we can't wait to have you back again. Definitely when your book comes out. And then of course I will also see you at the Sedona Reiki retreat over Labor Day. I know you're presenting there as well, so we'll get to see you in person.
Well, thank you very much. It's been a great pleasure.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And for Robyn and I, we are always, as always, at ReikiLifestyle.com for our classes, social media. Robyn is Robyn
Benelli Reiki.
Robyn Benelli Reiki. And then everything else is ReikiLifestyle.com. All right. Well, thank you all for listening. Great conversation. Thank you so much for all you do. Oh, and I do want to mention again, the Center for Reiki Research.com.
.org.
Thank you.
You also have a Facebook page. It's Center for Reiki Research Facebook page too.
Yeah, Center for Reiki Research.
Because you do like not webinars. What am I thinking? You do webinars, but you do some. You do webinars from time.
Yeah, and also we're having our first Reiki conference in April.
Fantastic.
Oh, you are. That's exciting. Do you want to just tell us about that real quickly?
Yeah, it's the end of April. So if you go on to that website, centerforreikiresearch.org, you can find out about the conference. It's a 2-day conference. We have speakers talking about their own Reiki research. William will give a keynote, I'll give a keynote, and we'll have some panels for questions. And also we'll be doing like Reiki over Zoom.
Okay, so it's online, it's not in person?
Yeah, it's all online. Yeah.
And they go to centerforreikiresearch.org for that information.
Great.
Awesome. We go.
Yeah.
And also for any of you that are looking for, I think you guys have tax deductible donations, right? For the centerforreikiresearch.org to help support this, funding for the organization. So if anybody is looking for that and, really important places to donate, that is a great place to donate also.
Great.
Well,
and
Ann,
definitely go follow their Facebook page because I follow you.
yes.
And you get the updates of when the, the conference, the webinar, all of those things are coming out. So it's really nice. So you can like go to their website to sign up, but you can, if you follow their Facebook page, they definitely update their followers when those different things are going on.
Mhm.
So
Great.
okay.
All right. Well, thank you so much.